My next guest is often described as a literary phenomenon, and that's probably because she is. A bestseller who didn't start writing until she was 40, and who since then has spread the working-class culture of the North East to almost every part of the world. Most of her books, and she's now written 54, are set here in the North, and spring from her own experiences here on Tyneside when she was a child during the First World War, and a young woman during the Depression. She's Catherine Cookson, who, with her husband Tom, has lived in Hastings most of her life. But 4 years ago, Catherine Cookson came back home to the North. She now lives with Tom in a lovely house at Corbridge, overlooking the Tyne Valley. And here she still works as busily as ever. Well, Catherine Cookson, you are you must be the world's most prolific, most successful writer. You've done just about everything. You must have just about all your ambitions fulfilled, I would think. But that house in Corbridge means something special to you, doesn't it?
Yes, as a home, but I don't think, quite candidly, it means anything more special than my home did in Hastings. You see, Mike, people say, oh, you know, you live in this great big house, isn't it wonderful to get this out of writing? I didn't get that house out of writing. I didn't get my Hastings house out of writing. I got that by hard work, my husband and I working very hard. And anyway, as for big houses, Mike, I've always lived in big houses since I was 18. I mean, you couldn't get a bigger house than the workhouse, and that's where I started at 18.
That's a lovely time.
Yes, I did. 4.5 years in South Shields, and then 10 in Hastings. You see?
Well, yeah, you had a big house in Hastings, a very happy life down there.
Yes.
Why did you suddenly decide, 3 or 4 years ago, to come back to the North East?
Don't blame me. Blame Tom. Well, you see, I had to, quite candidly, every year I'd make the trip up, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year, to get the feeling for a new story, because I had to go on the fells in different places to get this setting. And the more often we came up, the more in love Tom, fell with the people, not only the place, but the people of the North. It was he who wanted to come back. Isn't it dreadful for me to admit this? But it was he who wanted to come back more than me. But he also felt that I should die among the Indian folk. And I...
What a charming
Yes,
thought,
what a thought, yes, but he did. He thought, if he died, he said this, if he died, you know, there I'd be stuck among a lot of Southerners. And he's a Southern man, he's an Essex man. But quite candidly, I agreed with him. And I knew it was time to come back. You know, like the eel going back to the gas of sea, I came back, as I said before, to die.
Yeah, we said Tom fell in love with the area, but you fell out of love with the area.
Oh, years ago when I left, in the slump, I did fall, and I was never coming back. Oh boy, no. But I'm glad to be back. In spite of many things, I'm glad to be back.
Well, talking about years ago, let's take a look at, if you like, the Catherine Cookson personal photograph album.
Yes.
Because we have a photograph one of, a very young Catherine, aged 6?
Yes, about 6 or 7, yes. And somebody forgot to fasten me cuffs.
Which was a lovely child, wasn't
yes,
she?
Yes, well, the thing is that... Oh, there now. I'm standing on the exact spot where the kitchen was on 10 William Black Street before they pulled it down. And that's where everything happened.
And that was in East Jarrow?
East Jarrow. I was very sorry. That was taken by a film company. And I was very sorry to see that place go. I howled that day that I stood there, because so much had happened in that kitchen. What I am now, what I write about now, was born in that kitchen. All life lived in that kitchen.
Yes. Yeah, the kitchen was the hub
well,
of the family.
It was the hub of the family, yes.
Now this is the Harton
workhouse laundry, yes. Now that was taken just before I went there. I took the place of one of the girls. The officers were dressed in those dark uniforms. There's 4 officers there, the dark uniforms and the caps. And these are outside ironers at the beginning, and the rest are inmates.
We must remind you that you were the laundry supervisor there.
I was a checker. I was a lowest, couldn't get much lower than a checker in the laundry. That was my office. They called it an office down there. Oh, yes. But there were happy days there, and there were, unhappy days. It's life.
A very hard life, too, I was thinking.
Oh, yes, it was a very hard life. But I've always hung on to that picture to remind me I was there, because I look back and sometimes I think, did I work in a laundry? Because, quite candidly, I didn't like working in a laundry. I thought I was worth something better.
It was a job, though, wasn't it? A job.
I was jolly glad to get that job, believe me. I thought I'd fallen on my feet. I thought that that's what God had designed, you know, made for me. I was to be a checker in a laundry at £2 a month and 4 square meals a day and free soup. What more could you want out of life?
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of people may not know that, in fact, you are a very, very talented artist.
Oh,
well,
keep the last.
This proves it, doesn't it?
That is the beginning of it. I couldn't draw people, and I was going across that green, and I looked at this cathedral and I thought, I could draw that. Now, I haven't drawn anything like that in my life, but I sat down with a pencil and I drew that. And I was so proud of it. I had it framed in Passepartout, and we were invited to tea that evening by one of the masters. We were evacuated to St. Albans at the time, and I took this proudly along to this master to see this, and he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he said to me, was there any necessity to have it framed? And I became an artist, you know, a commercial artist during the war, all because, you know, that scraped the bottom of the barrel. There were no art, they're all at the war. Ah, now there's a handsome fellow.
Very handsome guy, and he's very
handsome
he's
still
today,
handsome
yes.
today too. That's the best fellow on earth. That. And now that was one of the first portraits I ever attempted, and then I discovered I could do portraits with these 2 pencils, and then of course all this went up in smoke. All this kind of thing went up in smoke, and I had a breakdown. And that was the first picture I did after, well, I was still in the breakdown, but I was at home in Hastings after the war, and I wanted to do big splashes of colour. I knew that I could never draw again. This finicky, terrible, you know, testing work, I could never do it again. But I went out in the garden one day, and I drew those poppies just as they grew, and I've still got them in my sitting room, and they're still as bright as ever. Now, you won't believe it, but that's a view that I see practically every other day from my bedroom window. I see the most magnificent skies from our house in Corbridge. And I do the skies, but I put in different bottoms, you know, fields or villages or seas. But those are the skies. That's another one.
There's another one, yes.
Now, that was a sunset. And I put in rocks in the sea at the bottom. But that was an exact sunset. My husband and I, we spent a lot of time looking at the sunsets.
Well, it shows Miles' imagination, which, of course, as a writer you have, you know, putting the rocks in there. And,
yes.
I mean, looking out your back window and not seeing rocks and things.
Well, my imagination sees more than rocks.
But to go with the sunset
We
and
won't go
the sea.
into it.
Do you still get the thrill and the joy of writing that I presume you had when you started?
Oh, thrill and joy, no. I get no thrill or joy. This is a false impression of writing altogether. I think every writer would say, with your first book, you go doolally-tap. You know, nobody's ever written a book before. The libraries are full of books, but what are they? There's only this book that you've written. I had that feeling with my first book. Most writers have. But after that, it's technique. It's learning. I thought after my first book, I could write anything. I had to learn that I couldn't. And I'm still learning. 54 on the market now, and I'm still learning.
Yeah, 54 books.
Well, yes.
I was in your study a few months ago,
Yes.
and I was most thrilled to see, you know, the name Catherine Cookson, all the books. And you're not thrilled anymore at seeing it anymore.
They're translated into 15 languages, the Mexican and even in Japanese. But no, I'm not being blasé, but I'm not. I get a thrill, not a thrill. I get a deep interest when I conceive a story. That germ of that story might be back in that kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's been growing all the time in the subconscious, and I believe a lot. All my work goes on in the subconscious.
So
It's a factory.
Do you think of the story first or the characters?
I think of the characters. And I don't believe in what they call plots. I get a set of characters and I place them in an environment. We all act to our environment. And so there is the story. But there's an essential thing with my way of writing. I must have the end before I get the beginning. And if I don't have the end, that story doesn't work. I've got 10 up in the attic now that the publishers will bring out after I go. But the thing is that I got the end, but I didn't stick to it. I went off at tangents. But if I've got to be successful in my way of writing, I've got to have the end.
But do you get the end as a sort of blinding revelation?
No, there's no blinding revelation in this business. No, it's grind and hard work. People don't really, they just think you sit down and write and you have secretaries, that you do. I used to write in longhand for first 15 books that I did until I got writer's cramp. And I thought I'd never write again. It was Tom who said, get a tape recorder, you're a jabberer. You can jabber into that. You see, I never thought I could do it. But now, there's one thing essential, apart from the tape recorder, before I start on the tape recorder. I must say everything in film form. I act. I'm a frustrated actress, Mike. Have you got any spare jobs?
There's a Luke Man's job going on Look North, I think, shortly.
But the thing is that I really do. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I can be sitting in bed, and I see everything as on a film, and I'm acting out the parts, and I'm doing the dialogue. That is important. I am doing the dialogue, whether it's swearing or making love or crying, and I do. If I don't cry over a sad part in one of my books, the reader's not going to cry over it either, you see.
Over the years, Catherine, you must have been wined and dined and feted by all the big guys and the publishers and all this stuff. Now, how did a Geordie lass from Jarrah cope with all this sort of thing?
Oh, she coped pretty well, lad. But I think I've been in most hotels in London. But there's one day when I didn't nearly cope. I remember this. We often laugh about this, Tom and I. It happened when I was when G. Arthur Rank was going to film A Grand Man, and it got into the papers in this part of the country, and this very busy reporter phoned up my publisher and asked how much I was getting for this film. My publisher wouldn't tell me. He phoned my agent. My agent wouldn't tell me. They phoned me not to tell him. I would have told the bloke, but no, I wouldn't tell him. So he wrote a piece in the paper. This northern lass, living in a mansion in Sussex, writing about the poor people of the north, making money. He bet that I got £5,000 for that film. I got 750, and I had to pay 15% back to my publisher, 10% to the agent. I had to pay tax out of 750. But anyway, I was mad about this. If I'd had 5,000, Tom would have retired. 5,000 in 1955 was a lot of money. Yes. Well, anyway, this particular day, I was asked to wine and dine at the Café Royal with one of my editors, who was a very sedate gentleman. He was about 6'3". He was broad with it, stately. He spoke in a very deep, slow voice, perfect English. I arrived at the Café Royal. It was very hot. He asked me what I would like to drink. I said, well, a long fruit drink, please. He said, would I like a Pimm's? Well, I thought Pimm's was a fruit drink, so I had a Pimm's, you see. And I knew nothing about, liquors. I was anti-drink. And so we started our lunch with I had 2 glasses of champagne. And it loosened my tongue, and I started to tell him about this fella, this cheeky monkey in the north, who had been writing, and he knew about this fella, and he sympathized with me in his very dignified way. And then I had a glass of red wine, and I talked more about this fella, this cheeky monkey in the north, you see. And I kept on about this fellow, and at last, this very dignified, it come to the pudding time, and the waiter came up. We were having a crepe Suzette, you see, and he was pouring the brandy on this pancake, when my very dignified editor put his hand across the red velvet back of the seat, and looking me right in the face, and in the broadest Geordie, he said, Never you mind, Henny, they're not but a lot of dozy buggers up there.
What a marvellous story. Catherine Cookson, thank you very much indeed.